Hi, everyone. This is Tracy Malone from NarcissistAbuseSupport.com. I am an international coach and I am here to help you. So please visit my website, NarcissistAbuseSupport.com, if you've got more questions. Today, we are going to speak to those who are venturing out after narcissistic abuse and starting again, maybe trying to date, maybe trying to find a relationship. How do we do it? How do we trust again? These worlds are always changing, and we just had trauma. How do we trust again? We've been betrayed. What do we do? How do we not make the same mistakes again? Today, my friend Dawn Smith is a relationship expert, and she's going to teach us what we have to do. So let's go meet Dawn. Welcome, Dawn. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Tracy. I'm really excited.
You are a relationship coach and amongst many other things.
Yeah.
Today, we are going to talk about how do we make sure this doesn't happen again?
Mm.
And I know when you and I were talking, planning this call, we talked about best practices that are sort of myths. Like they just
Yes,
keep going on and on and on, but they could be kind of detrimental. Do we want to talk about that first? I think it would be helpful.
I would love to. I'm really, really passionate about that, Tracy. Like I write and I speak on disrupting the outdated relationship myths because I feel like I don't know any of us who was taught these things in school, So I really, I really wish I had learned these things so much earlier in life. And I feel like not only do we not learn how to have effective communication and conflict resolution and really get to understand each other more deeply in relationships, but the few things that are kind of passed on as best practices often make things worse. Um, so, it's my cat. Um, One of the ones I feel really strongly about is that so many of us were taught that like the foundation should be compromised, right? Whatever you do, make sure you're good with your partner and that you compromise. And I I think compromise is almost a dirty word because by definition, it means that you're each giving up a little bit of what you really want, right? And I think one of the things I'm curious if you see this a lot with the couples you work with, but I think foundationally, one of the biggest things I see with my struggling couples is that they stop feeling, or if they ever did, feel like a team. And so it becomes really locked into this, well, I want this and my partner wants this, and why can't we, right? And so the compromise thing is like, ah, fine, I'll relent and give up, or you really. And instead, if you approach it as a we, if everything's approached as what will work for us, what makes sense as a team, then you're kind of forced to be creative and think of a third path, a fourth path, a fifth path until you lock in on something you might not otherwise have thought of that actually makes both of you happy.
Right. And it's a blended idea versus yours and mine. And you've got to do what I need, and no, you have to do what I need, and that gets you in the loop that you can't.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
the we is sort of still compromising, right? For
Yeah, I know it is a question of semantics, I think, right? It's a lot of it is how you define it, but just this idea that stop approaching it because often even couples are like they're actually kind of having two separate conversations in terms of what they're upset about. They think they're talking about trying to get to the same thing, but our lenses are so different that you end up often locked into this circle of my way and this circle of that way. So, yeah, I think it's very helpful for that to just keep thinking of wait, we're a we, now what?
right.
Yeah.
And what
Uh,
other myths? What other myths? Because
yeah.
I was raised with a whole like notebook of myths.
Right.
Then
Uh,
you feel like a failure because you're like meeting standards that were made in the 20s or something.
right. So a couple other ones. One has to do with intimacy. This idea that like, of course it's going to fall off after we're married. Why? Like, it just that one is such a total myth as well, I think. And not to discount that relationships do have cycles. We're not going to be perpetually in the honeymoon phase. I recognize that. But again, it just takes some creative problem solving, right? So this idea that one of the bittersweet things about working with the couples I work at who are almost always right at the brink is that more often than not, if they're both showing up, they actually want the same thing. They want deeper communication, deeper connection, more intimacy. They both want it. And
Mhm.
yet they're so far removed from it. And they'll say, oh, I'm just too busy, or, we just keep our schedules are off, or, one person starts feeling rejected, the other person doesn't want to always initiate. Okay, you want the same thing. And so schedule the things that are meaningful to you. Make time in advance for the things that are important to you, right? I'm not even opposed to scheduling sex. Do
Mhm.
what it takes to make these things non-negotiable in your life. And if a work appointment comes up, sorry, I'm already booked. They don't have to know what you're booked for. You're booked. This
Mhm.
is a priority. Go to bed at the same time once or twice a week, right? So it's a lot of it's just a logistics of figuring things out, which may not feel very romantic, but that actually I love that because then it creates this anticipation and so yeah, that's another one.
I like
Um,
I like that one. Is there another one? Should we go for three?
Sure, sure. I'll share one more. Um, the idea that if we've been together for a long time, I shouldn't have to spell things out for you. My partner should know me well enough
Mhm.
that, of course, they're going to, buy the milk or pick up the dry cleaner or whatever it is, right? These day-to-day things. I tell my couples, tell me how you load the dishwasher, and I'll tell you everything that's wrong with the relationship.
Oh.
It's always the day-to-day things that are symptomatic of these much bigger issues of feeling unheard, unappreciated, right? And I think often I find that we're reluctant to spell it out for our partners. We feel like we should have gotten close enough that they know. But it's not a factor of how long you've been together. It's a factor of us truly, from a neuroscience perspective, the way we process and communicate is different. And it doesn't matter if I'm working with same-sex couples, hetero couples, non-binary, we tend to be drawn to our counterpart. So you're going to have a different way of processing. And it's important to just make a direct request. Hey, I could really use this. I could really use a hug right now. Like, do you think that every day before you go to work, we could have a kiss, right? Gottman talks about the 6-second kiss. These things that ask for it, your partner will probably welcome this idea of, oh, like now I finally know what's going on. Yeah.
And everything that we're talking about now, as you're sitting here saying it, I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work in the narc world. No, you can't really ask them for what you want. It's always about them.
Right. That is true.
But there's also, I think, if we're looking at understanding our own triggers, because what you're talking about is the coming together, but each party has their own triggers. How does that kind of fall into this?
I want to take just a moment to touch on what you just said about it not working in the narc world with when you're dealing with a partner who truly has a built-in lack of empathy, right? Where we're talking about not just the narcissism that can be thrown around, but true narcissistic tendencies or diagnosis. You're absolutely right. None of this applies. What I think does apply is, which I guess we'll get to next, is when we have been through a divorce, especially a really contentious divorce, um, how can we not bring any of those assumptions into our next relationship, still recognizing so we don't fall into the same patterns, but really being clear, am I making assumptions or putting things through a filter because of what I've been through, or is this fact that this new situation is hitting too many of the same notes, right? Those kinds of things. So the myths that I like to flip, that is for, relationships where both parties are at least close to equally invested in creating a compassionate, nurturing relationship.
And I'm so glad that we brought this in, especially early in the videos,
Yeah.
so that people can understand it's not about fixing you and the narc. In this talk we're talking, we are talking about how do we not let this happen again with the next partner, right?
That's exactly
It
right.
is, it is knowing that you have the right to speak up, knowing that you should be asking for, I need a hug, because that is sort of setting a boundary, right? Hey,
A
this is what
hundred
I
percent.
need. I need a hug. I need to, you know, do this before bed. I need to feel loved. I need to have a conversation by finding and finding your place in your voice to say, I want that. Means if the narcissist is the new one on the dating pool and you don't know it yet, by setting that boundary and saying, this is what I need, you either give them an opportunity to show up and do it,
Yes.
an opportunity to go, oh yeah, sure, no problem, and then not do it and show you by action that they are not one who will listen to your needs because you said them and they're not listening then. Time to go right then. If we see these flags, these are really good things to apply because it does sort of divulge that there is a flag. He's not going to listen. She's not going to listen. I said I need this. They don't give it to me.
Yes.
That's all you need is to leave, is to say, if I ask for something and they still won't give it to me, take a number, you're at the deli. Next, we don't need to keep someone in our life and fall in love with potential.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's such an excellent, excellent point, right? And I think, the narrative that I think this talk is about is how do we not repeat the same mistakes? So how do we recognize things early on without making assumptions and then build something different, right? Really create something different so that we're not acting out of fear. That's such a big piece of it, right? That we're not blowing things up because we're afraid that we're actually being really intentional and conscious about it. Um, to that point, I think one of the things I would share with your listeners, that I'm still learning how to do, is that one of the things you can do when you're with somebody new and you're trying to parcel out maybe some of your triggers, or am I really noticing something in the new person, or is this just am I in a heightened sense because of everything that's happened? Is this real, is this not real? Sometimes in the moment it's very, very hard to parcel out. And one of the tips I would give your listeners is that you can sort of label that with a new partner. If you're able to say, hey, I'm noticing myself having these feelings,
Mhm.
and I don't want to put something on you that's not yours, but I just wanted to like put it out there. I'm noticing myself feeling anxious. I'm noticing myself, feeling a little triggered by that. And it could just be from my past, but I just wanted to speak to it so that you know that this is not personal. This is me trying to parcel these things out. And again, a secure, compassionate partner will react really positively to that.
Right. And again, you're weeding out the one who gets angry at you for
Yeah.
setting a boundary and for
Right.
having feelings and be able to voice them. I
Exactly.
think there's also with that covert narc, they could certainly be, placating you. Oh, sure. No, I'll never do that again. But we are watching, we are listening, we are keeping track, and speaking up and saying, hey, when I told you about that, and, I'm not getting it, put it back on their plate. If you want to give them a second or third chance, those are the ways to do it by observing it, going, okay, I asked for this, I'm
Right.
getting it, I'm going to say it again, second chance, three strikes, I'm gone.
Yeah, yeah. Because also recognizing there are times when we will get triggered, and it's not fair to a new person who is coming in compassionately and lovingly. And if they keep feeling like we're putting that on them, they would be in their rights to leave as well. So I think that framing of putting in terms of ourself and saying, hey, I'm noticing myself having these feelings and I just need to kind of parcel it out. I think that's a really respectful way to do it.
Absolutely. And again, if we don't learn to speak our feelings, we're going to eat them for breakfast every day, right? We have to learn. That's the difference between a narcissistic relationship where you weren't allowed to say things, you weren't allowed to speak up, you weren't allowed to set boundaries. So if we're looking at how we never make this happen again, we have to learn to step up to that plate and take the results as data versus pain, because it's not that they meant to hurt you. It's just that they can't do that. I personally could not fly your 747. Don't put me in the cockpit, right? That's not
Right.
my responsibility, my job, my training. And some people are trained for openness and kindness, and some in the narc world are going to show who they are and go, yeah, I don't want that like touchy-feely stuff and I'm out of here, right? Fine. Have a nice trip, right? This, when you were talking about triggers, so many survivors of
Yeah.
after narcissistic abuse are very reactionary.
Yes.
They see a little thing, and I'm going to use one of my best friends as an example here. When she started dating, the guy opened the car door and she went, he's love bombing me, and like ran for the hills, right?
Oh my gosh.
We have to take the new person and take some of the stuff and the recordings and the words. Oh, that was gaslighting. He didn't show up, or that,
Right.
we have
No.
to move that language, or we're coming in there with a big screen over our head and everything will be blinded by it.
I completely agree with that. It's hard to do, but it's essential. You can't put all that on a new person right away. And yeah, I mean, again, that's something where you could just notice that, where she could go, oh my gosh, okay, maybe, that was probably an overreaction. I'm sorry. That comes from, some of my
Exactly.
past drama, right? I mean, I think we get to a certain age. I don't know how old most of your listeners are, but I think you and I are around the same age where everybody's going to be bringing some baggage, right? So we need to be mindful. I think a caring partner is going to be understanding and mindful, especially if we label it, if we name it. And I think that brings me to one of the other things I wanted to share in terms of how do we not repeat our mistakes. I mean, I think this is kind of goes without saying, but we have to do our own processing. And that doesn't just mean time, right? I think I have ADHD, so time is relative for all of us, but especially for those of us where, time is sped up and slowed down and all those things. So it's not, I don't think it's a question of, oh, you have to take at least a year or 2 years or, whatever it is. It's not about time, but that processing, I think it's essential to not only walk through the heightened patterns that you've seen, but walk through your role. Who am I and who do I want to be? And what have I actually learned from this that I know I want to do or not do in the next relationship? What are the pieces? I know you know this world so much, but I think that can be the hardest part of dealing with a narcissist is you can lose your sense of identity. You really don't know what normal is anymore. You don't know what healthy is anymore because you were living by a construct that wasn't real, which is terrifying.
Absolutely. And
It's terrifying. You can completely lose that. I know many have stayed with narcissists for decades, and you come out and go, I don't know what's real. Everything I thought I was real wasn't real. So who am I? What was I in that? Am I an illusion? Everything that I thought was good and healthy or bad and not good, and I thought it was bad for these other reasons, and it was bad for this.
Mhm,
Right. And so that process has to be taken piece by piece
mhm.
to not only, I think there's a lot of attention on, well, I want to look for the red flags and I want to notice this. That's important. But also to sort of reclaim who we are, who we want to be, and what lessons have we truly learned that we're going to do differently.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it on the head because I think people need to understand their own feelings. Like you said, tap into it. I'm feeling this way right now. And you don't have to talk in therapist speak, which is what people, when I say something like that, they're like, that's therapist speak. I don't talk right. Okay, fine. But it's the idea that you have a right to ask for things, right? But I think we need to understand, like my friend in the car, and he's love bombing me. Oh my God, run for the hills. Clearly, she wasn't ready, and she still admits it years later that she wasn't ready when she went out with that person. But it's about people understanding their own wounds and
That's right.
healing them. If you have fear, if you have shame, if you have guilt, you are so manipulatable by a narcissist. So healing the wounds and understanding again your accountability in the role of this was maybe I never set boundaries. I wasn't allowed, but maybe I now need a brush up on boundaries because I wasn't able to. And I'll practice it on the Starbucks lady saying, can I get a little extra whipped cream? And
Yes, I love that.
to speak up and get your voice so that you are not blindsided by setting a boundary or not knowing how to do it, and you want to, but you don't know because you weren't allowed to. So
Yeah.
healing those wounds, healing the trauma helps you not walk into it with the he's love bombing me, right? It helps you understand who you are. So you walk into this relationship as a whole person, not this broken particle thing that came from a narcissistic, like crazy. If you are broken, you're going to bring brokenness into it with that kind of reaction. Oh, they loaded the dishwasher wrong. Oh, some of this stuff is imprinted in our psyche, imprinted in our legacy of growing up this way. And then if you were in a relationship with them, those patterns get imprinted on you. Do you want them? Do
Yeah.
you want to hold on to that? How does it serve you? And why are you holding on to it if it's not?
Absolutely, absolutely. And a little plug for what you and I both do for different reasons, we each, I think, need to be with neutral coaches, counselors, people who can um, be that mirror back to us, but also give us the perspective, especially when you've been through that. Yes to journaling, yes to mindfulness, yes to all these exercises, but because you only have you and your own brain and your own backstory, it can be very hard to know, to have perspective, to know what sort of normal baseline is. Also, because narcissistic relationships and anybody who's been through a high conflict divorce, chances are you were very isolated,
Mhm.
very isolated, right? Because that's part of that personality type is keeping you from those closest to you. So by the point that the divorce happens, chances are you're really in the echo chamber of your own brain.
Mhm.
And that's, I think there's an emphasis on women, but it's really both for different reasons because from a neuroscience perspective, male brains tend to compartmentalize and keep things inside.
Mhm.
And society just compounds that, right? Even though things are getting more equal, men are still taught not to, for the most part, not to be super emotionally expressive,
Mhm.
right? And then women, we tend to draw more connections between things. We tend to have more going on internally, and it can be very hard to sort of untangle it and process it out. So for both, I feel like it's essential to have a space with a professional who's neutral, who can give you some of that perspective, a bit of a sense of the next steps, some tools. It's essential.
I think you're absolutely right on that because I personally think there's a difference between coaches and therapists.
Yeah, there is.
And there's more guidance in the coaching world. But I think when you were just talking and we are talking about wounds right before that, right? One of the biggest wounds I see that people go back to dating again is that they're so lonely. They can't stand being alone, and they're almost trying to fill their happy hole with a relationship.
That's
Um,
right.
and if you are not whole walking in there and you are trying to fill a hole, you'll settle for something because, well, it's good enough, or that he only does it sometimes. She does this. I can adjust. I can fix that. I can save them, right?
Hmm.
We're done with that. When you have that loneliness like stuck to you,
Yeah.
desperate to find someone, you're not going to find the right person. And
Yeah.
so working with a coach, working with someone who's going to go, I know you're lonely, but like that's not the place to go into this. How do we work on those feelings so that you're happy by yourself? So
Yeah.
someone isn't having to fix you and come in and fill that happy hole. Because if that's their purpose, that's not a real relationship. That's built on a crazy need
Yeah.
that may never get filled because you're not going in it with the right heart.
Yes. Well put. Absolutely essential.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And getting that support, of course, from your, building or rebuilding community and intentional friendships, not just people to have around you, right? Really cultivating those meaningful connections where you feel more nourished after, right? Not depleted. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So tell us, Dawn, how people can find you.
Yes, I'd love to. It's relationshipcoachdawn.com or at relationship coach Dawn on IG. That's the easiest way. And we always do free consultations. Right now, you will speak directly with me. And if I'm not the right fit, I'm happy to point people in the right direction. We'll just have a chat.
Nice, nice. Well, we'll put your stuff down in the notes of the show. And I want to thank you so much for being here. This is, out of the normal NARC box, but I think
Loved it.
people who are gonna start again need to keep these things in mind because I did it again. I did it and married and did it again because I didn't do the healing and the work and know that I had rights in the second relationship.
Absolutely. I think you and I both come to this work because of what we've been through. I know we both went through very contentious divorces. And yeah, we come at this work because, we studied it because we came from difficult scenarios. So 100%, yes. And not to have the shame around that. That doesn't serve at all. We're here to build a beautiful, that I think is also one of the things coaching versus counseling, there's absolutely a place for counseling and therapy, especially when there's serious trauma, 100%. This is not a substitute for it. But counseling often focuses on processing the past, where coaching focuses a lot on building the future.
Love that.
But
Thank you so much, Dawn, and everybody reach out to her and
yay.
thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. This was wonderful.
I hope you guys found that helpful. I love having conversations with new people that haven't been on my channel before because they have so many creative and beautiful ideas. So reach out to her if you have any further questions. I am Tracy Malone from Narcissist Abuse Support. How could I say my own name wrong? If you need any help, I am here for coaching and I look forward to meeting you soon.